Imagine walking up to your school every day and having to see the changes that this pandemic has brought about. There will be no hugs or high fives, just reminders to social distance and wear a mask. The entry of every hallway reminds you once again that we are in a pandemic. Even the welcome back to school signs help to tell the story of the changes. Reminders are everywhere. The bathroom doors, the trash cans you see in the hallway for meals that will be eaten in the classroom. Everywhere you look, you're reminded that this year is unlike any other year. You are teaching in a pandemic. Mrs. Heiser, thank you for being available to help us better understand teaching during a pandemic. How has this pandemic affected your relationship with your students?
It's been hard. I'm a hugger. I'm a high five. I'm typically all over my kids. My kids are my babies, and this year it's been different because I haven't got that. The relationship among my students together has been phenomenal, but I feel like there's just that piece that I'm having to fill with more, open discussion during class time. But that physical, emotional relationship that I typically have with my students, I feel like that it's lacking, and it's probably the hardest part of this whole pandemic.
I know that your school year ended last year teaching remote, and this year you began the year teaching remote. What are some changes that have occurred as a result of this pandemic?
It's really made teachers become more flexible and more, willing to change, willing to accept that you can't stick with what you've done the past so and so years. You really have to kind of think outside the box. How can I reach these kids in a new way? How can I reach these kids in class without small group and without being in the classroom? It's really made us become more proficient with our technology and all of our resources that we have. And it's made us a lot better teachers because we are having to kind of dig and find and really collaborate together to come up with the best practices in this very crazy time.
I know guided reading was a big part of your instruction. That was when you would pull that small group and be able to give that instruction at their reading level. What have you found that works well as a replacement for guided reading?
I haven't found the best replacement for guided reading, but what we've kind of done to incorporate a small group with reading instruction. We have our Zoom that we use we call it a book club, where the kids get on. I assign a collection on Get Epic. They get to choose what book, or I might assign a certain book to a group of students, and they still get to have that discussion. And I might pop in and listen to certain kids read, but I don't have them all gathered around a table like they used to be. So I do have the Zoom and book clubs, but it's not guided reading per se. Most of my guided reading instruction, I either do whole group or I do individual now.
Interactive read alouds are an important part of your reading instruction, and in the past when I've been in your room, I've noticed that your students were sitting on the carpet and as you read the book. How are you working around the old way you did your interactive read alouds?
I'm still doing interactive read alouds almost daily. This time I just put it under my duck cam and show it on my screen. And I actually do it when I have Zoom kids on as well. My remote learners are on as well. So there I'm sharing my screen under of the book, what's under my duck cam. And the kids in class and the kids remotely are getting to participate in that discussion when I ask questions. It takes a little bit more to get some answers out of those remote kids, those ones on Zoom. And I still get to do some turn and talk. They might have to say it a little bit louder because they're farther away from each other. Sometimes I have my Zoom kids talk and my kids in class who turn and talk. But I'm not on the carpet with them, but it hasn't been too bad. The IRA has been one thing that has kind of been a consistent, it's just looks a little bit different.
I know you've touched on this a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more on some of the things that you've done to work around not being able to pull those small groups and get close to students?
That's been my struggle. As a fourth grade teacher, one of our biggest struggles that we always face is grammar and writing. And in a writing composition, not being able to pull a small group has been difficult. So I'm doing a lot more one-on-one conferencing, which doesn't allow me to get to as many kids. Instead of meeting with 10 kids a day, pulling 2 different groups, I'm now getting to maybe 3 or 4 kids a day and just going and doing individual conferencing. The kids are feeling a little bit more comfortable to open up and share because it's just me and that student, but they're not getting to hear from other kids or see what other kids are doing in that small group setting. So I'm just doing a lot of individual conferencing, which can be very exhausting.
Ms. Heiser, I know in the past it was very common to see your students working in stations. What can a teacher do to take the place of stations and still keep her students engaged?
This year we're doing a lot of kind of techie stations. We are doing a lot more choice boards with the kids where we're assigning them a certain amount of things and they go and choose that. Allowing that choice is keeping them engaged. I still think it's such a crucial key for kids to talk to each other and discuss things. So there are certain stations where I do have partner work, and luckily we were in a school with 1 foot squares, so they know to count 6 squares between them, and they kind of spread out in the hall and do their stations together too. So biggest thing is just utilizing that technology and allowing a lot of choice.
Normally, you would have 2 groups of students who would circulate through your classroom, but that isn't the case now. What are you doing to make the learning environment in the other classrooms similar to this room?
I have created more anchor charts this year than probably ever. I'm having to double my anchor charts, and so I keep what's in here, my typical anchor charts, but I'm also having to kind of double them and put them in there, or I roll them up and take them into my other classroom. I'm sure my math teacher is kind of annoyed with how many books I've put in her room as well, but she's doing the same, so it's been a good partnership of knowing that's just kind of how it is this year.
What advice would you give to administrators to help ease the tension that teachers are feeling with all these changes?
Positive. I think that's the huge thing right now is to stay positive. We're in a world that can be so negative with what's going on, and so staying positive for your teachers, supporting your teachers, not focusing so much on where they have been in the past, looking more at the growth. We're taking baby steps to growth to fill in these gaps, and celebrating those little baby steps can mean the world to a teacher.
How has the stress level changed with teaching during this pandemic?
Uh, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. I go home. I have a lot more work at home that I'm taking. Things that you might have had in the past, available resources, available already made stations and manipulatives. You're having to kind of rethink all that. So a lot of it's starting all over. And it's been a lot of homework, which as a mom, a pregnant mom with 2 little boys at home, it wears and tears on you because you're missing time with them. But it's part of the gig.
What advice would you give teachers to help with this extra stress?
It's advice I need to take myself. Leave it at work. Have a time that you shut it off. Have a time that you put it away. And it's so hard to do that, to say, to not think about it, but get to a stopping point and put it away. Because if you keep churning on it, you're going to drive yourself insane.
Can you say there is anything good that's come out of this pandemic regarding teaching?
Family. The kids have shown such an environment, and I don't know if it's the group of kids that we have, but I've never just had a group of kids who just have felt so friendly to each other. They talk with each other. They just seem like a bunch of brothers and sisters that they've all kind of united around this. We're having to persevere. We're having to, survive this together. And we're all new to this change. We're all kind of at the same level. So it really has united them. And that is precious.
Ms. Heiser, thank you for helping us to better understand your situation and for all the wonderful advice that you've given us.
Thank you.